Hey everyone, welcome to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Bacasa, and the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast aims to bring the best stories and tips. Stories and tips from those that truly make an impact within the sport of fly fishing. I'll dig into the past, present, and future of our guests, uncovering their amazing story and journey. Join me each week as I interview a new guest from somewhere around the globe. If you're not yet a subscriber, help by subscribing now so I can attract the most influential guests and sponsors to the podcast. Let's make this the top fly fishing specific podcast available. Today's show is brought to you by the following sponsors. Anglers Coffee, a brand of coffee for anglers by anglers. Owner Joan Monahan grew up fly fishing, and after spending 40 years in the coffee industry, perfecting blend and brew process, he retired to creating a coffee blend and brand for the sport of his passion. Go to www.anglerscoffee.com and pick up a bag of your choice. My personal favorite is the pre-ground caddis blend. It has a perfect balance of body, aroma, and acidity to kickstart my day. Thank you, Anglers Coffee, for supporting the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. We look forward to supporting you and your business. Again, www.anglerscoffee.com. Dupa Fish, that's D-U-P-E-A fish.com, www.dupafish.com. Coming soon, but head over now, pre-register, and make sure you are ready to receive all the notices of the great deals that we'll be having coming your way. With years of accumulated DIY, Todd and I have traveled and booked experience all over the globe. We know how hard it is to customize a trip to you and your group's particular needs. We will have a comprehensive list of service providers and guides to help you in selecting the perfect trip for your and your party's needs. Book a trip with us and have the adventure of a lifetime. That's Dupa Fish, www.dupafish.com. Welcome back, everyone, to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. This is your host, Christian Bacasa, and this week we've got some special guests, somebody that I met online, a great couple per se, father and daughter combination. Been fishing together quite a bit, and something's really inspiring for me because I've got two little girls myself. We've got Kat and Graeme Mulski on the line. Guys, it's great to have you on board.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I think, what we do today is we dive in a little bit to each of your stories and hear some of these tall tales about your fishing trips and then go from there. Does that sound like fun?
Yeah, sure. Sounds good.
All right. So Graeme, why don't we start with you? Yeah. You're the old dog in the bunch. Not that you're old, but you're getting up there, right?
Yeah, a little bit on the other side of the hill. That's right.
That's
going
right.
down.
But
still fishing.
That's right. When we, I don't know, most people don't know this, but when men age, we age like wine. We get finer as we go. So you're doing okay, my man. All right. So how did you get into fly fishing? What really led you to it?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Well, I was a gear fisherman since I was, could stand, but I lived in Hope, just off Bristol Island, so it was sort of a swing from the Fraser River around the island, so it was pretty easy to get involved in, quote, fishing. But fly fishing, the only fly fishing introduction in the early days was an old cane rod that my dad had in the closet that was dried out and done, but I used it a few times till I broke it, of course. And that was really much the first introduction. But it wasn't until much, much later that I got involved with fly fishing. That was, it's now about 30 years ago. But, yeah, it took a while to get involved in fly fishing. But my father was an avid fly fisherman when he was at Lake of the Woods back in Ontario. So that's where that brought that forward. But he never really sat down and said, son, let me tell you about all the secrets of fly fishing. Or it was really basically gear fishing. So that was really the first introduction for me.
And what were you typically targeting when you were gear fishing?
Sorry?
What were you targeting when you were gear fishing? Was it primarily trout or?
Well, no, everything that went across in the Fraser, this big, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Fraser River, but it's the river that runs through it, but it runs right from the interior of our province right into the ocean past Vancouver. But anyway, we were a couple 100 miles up the river, just off the river, and my dad worked at an operation on the boats there, a commercial operation for logging. But I would go down to the riverbank, and every species went by. We had the coho, the sockeye, obviously the kings, or we call them the springs, and of course the big sturgeons. So that's where I would just sit as a boy and with my cement mixer rod and Berkeley, whatever the hell he had, and I would just chuck it out with a spark plug, and my mother would give me Robin Hood flour and dough, and I'd make a big wad. We weren't allowed to use a fish hook, so I'd take a rod from a shower hanger and wrap this big wad of dough around it and chuck it out and throw it on, and just literally lay the rod on the sand and wait for it to move, and these monsters would come along and move it. And I would pick this thing up and start, no hope of pulling the damn thing in because it was so big. But that was when I was 9 or 10 years old, or maybe even earlier. And I had my dog at that time was the one who told me that I had a fish on, or I saw my rod being dragged down the damn beach.
Right.
But in many cases, I lost the whole rod and kit because I wasn't paying attention. But that's all the species came by there. So, we caught into my earlier teens, we would catch, it was a privilege now that I think about it. We caught every species that went up there. Coho, as I mentioned, and the sockeyes in particular. It was really an introduction to learning about the fish species, as they say, because there's lots of tributaries going up. But I was a carnivore at that time. We pretty much ate what we caught. So, and that changed later, which I can tell you another story about that. But that's another story, as I say. But that was the introduction.
That's pretty cool.
And getting the tug drug. That's where it started. Getting that instilled into my DNA, the feel of the tug. It was, holy moly, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, that had to be pretty amazing, especially as a little guy. Like you said, some of those fish are darn near the same size as you.
Yeah. The sturgeon were quite interesting because they weren't endangered at that time, but in those days you could actually, I used to collect agates in the clear water of the Fraser River before it got all muddy and polluted, and the jade you could find on the beaches too. So it was a pretty idyllic situation for a young kid to grow up on because it was a private island, and fishing was awesome. We didn't think anything of it. Yeah, it was great. We can go fishing. Okay.
Yeah. It sounds like you had a crew of friends too.
Yeah. Well, they would, all want to get involved, but you're kids. Fishing is great, but there's other things to do too. So,
right.
But that's where the passion started.
And then later in life, you did you continue gear fishing? Most of your young adulthood.
Yeah, most of the time. I got involved with the more river fishing, exterior of the outside of the Fraser. We have a lot of. I won't call them local rivers, but rivers, the Thompson a little further in the interior, and of course the Vedder, what we call the Vedder, the Chilliwack River, just outside of Hope. So they're very, still to this day, they're very prolific with all species, and they're still extremely well fished and overfished, but there's just so many people involved now in fishing. But that continued and even into, I say Catherine's introduction, and she can tell you the story a little better than I can, obviously, that she was fishing with her boyfriend. At that time, that's really, I think, she can tell you differently, but that's to see him, because he was the most avid fisherman I ever came across, him and his buddies. So if she had to see him, she had to go fishing, and then she got very good at it and still continues to be very good at it.
Very cool.
But that was the gear fishing, so. And you go out and buy all the stuff, the 10.5-foot rods, the level winders, the list that goes on, and then I thought that was expensive. Then I got introduced to fly fishing, and holy moly, open your wallet, I said, okay. But then I got educated in that too. I can tell you another story about that. you don't have to buy the store to be a successful, so-called successful fly fisherman.
Yeah,
and I got very humbled in that way by a couple of people, a young kid in Tunkwa Lake, which is a lake interior, and also Katherine knows about the Scottish ghost story on Skagit when I met the Scotsman, but those are other stories. But yeah, that's where the passion started with fly fishing. Fly fishing was, more of I've been to trade shows, kind of liked the concept of it, had my dad's old broken cane rod still, and actually had that repaired at one point, but I don't know where it is, to be honest. I might have sold it at a garage sale. And then I got a colleague at work. We got involved. Let's check this out, and we both got outfitted and spent a crap load of money, and out we went.
And what was your profession?
I'm in real estate. I'm a realtor. Okay. So we had some free time when we could, but obviously you're self-employed, so you still got to work real estate is not a 9-to-5 job. So it was a question of picking times, but we could do that. And that was very, easy to get some time to go up for a day or two or wherever to a lake or even locally. And we're very privileged here to be near Whistler and Squamish area, wonderful rivers that go through that area too. So there's, some local, easy to get to spots, I would say, a couple hours drive at the most. And that helped as far as keeping in the game. And then, of course, when we got the gear, the rest is history. It was just, wow, this is so cool. And a little tip for anybody getting into fly fishing, it's like a golf. If you're going to learn how to golf, just take a lesson. If you want to learn how to cast, I mean, there's a lot of self-taught folks out there, but damn, Skippy, just take a lesson from somebody who knows how, and it'll be like an exam. You'll say, hey, I get this. This clicks. This works. I love this. This works. I know how to do this now. And you'll get a whole lot better at it and feel a lot more comfortable with it. But that helped too. That helped me keep in the game, because everybody, and I, including myself, got very frustrated with learning, quote, how to cast. And of course, using the right gear, etc. But I had that part down, but because of all the reading, and Katherine mentioned earlier, we had, and still do, and she keeps in touch with these people. We call them the gurus, the people that get published and talk about, and I can name names, Phil Rowley and Brian Chan and all these fellows that have been through it for over years. And Brian was an old biologist, and he's still an avid fly fisherman. But he was very, very easy with his knowledge and very
open, willing to share.
He would impart he would share. And I learned that too. That's another thing to learn. If you ever want, just share with the other people. They want to learn, or at least even always share, what fly are you using? I mean, stuff like that. Yeah. But a simple act like that, or where did you catch the fish? Okay. Does it matter? I don't think so. Just let people know. I've given many flies to people but that goes back to the Scotsman. That's a long story. Anyway, that's pretty much a bit of a nutshell.
Yeah, I like that too. I share quite a bit. I always call it my angler's open door policy. It's just going to get people out there having a good time. And in all honesty, most people are weekend warriors. They're not out there every day anyhow. So
exactly,
if you can help them out and have a good time, all the more power to it, right?
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
Kat,
it's amazing.
Yeah, and Kat, you came into the picture fishing with your dad. It sounds like you had a little bit of an introduction with your boyfriend as well. Why don't you give us your background a little bit?
I would definitely downplay the boyfriend piece. Dad certainly fished a lot more with him than I did.
Yeah, probably.
Mainly because it was
I kind of like the first boyfriend. Let me
really
just interrupt.
It was really competitive. But
I kind of like the first boyfriend mainly because he fished.
Yeah, exactly. There was an impartiality there. That was, 20 years ago?
God.
Yeah. So, my fondest memory of like starting to fish probably would have been like on one of our little lakes here. Grew up North Vancouver, so over in Rice Lake, like a little cement mixer style bait caster kind of rod, and, like learned how to put, like, would we buy store-bought, like, shrimp,
Yep.
throw that on a hook and throw that in, and just, get super stoked when you sat there long enough to watch your, indicator go down, and then, hopefully you keep that fish on and be able to, give it back. And yeah, so I mean, those are usually like my first kind of memories. And I started doing that on my own in my teens and like my early 20s. I would just go up there by myself and kind of sit, bring a snack. And, I think I just enjoyed often the solitude of fishing.
Yeah.
And I really, really enjoyed just being out on the land and kind of like having that relaxing time to myself. But I also really enjoy fishing, obviously, with other people. So yeah, so like if Dad and friends were headed out to the Vetter, going going out for targeting springs, like, sure, okay. So I I'd learn how to get the rod all set up, and probably dealt with more bird's nests in an Abu Garcia than I'd like to admit. But I definitely also caught quite a few. I think my 20s was when I really learned how to harvest fish, when we were actually at that point in time keeping fish, eating them. We had a smoker.
Yeah.
Did a lot of harvesting, within reason, and really, just understanding like, life cycles of fish, and kind of getting more into kind of that line of understanding where the fish are coming from and how that all works. And also kind of understanding the unsaid culture of fishing, especially on pressured fisheries, like the Vetter, and just some of the funny stuff that comes out of that, in terms of like when Dad's saying being humbled, you go out there with all this expensive gear, and then you watch some, 5-year-old with some Canadian Tire plastic special that just like, I remember once seeing this 5-year-old literally had hooked into a spring, and like I watched the dad literally run down the whole beach. We watched it took about half an hour, and by hand and glove, he actually brought this spring in using like, I think it was a strawberry shortcake, like plastic reel.
Wow.
Like I've never seen it before. Yeah. So you're just kind of like, guess I don't have to spend all the money, right?
Yeah, you don't.
So yeah, so that was kind of more like the gear fishing side of stuff. And then I think I slowly got into fly fishing with Dad, mainly because he had started fly fishing and I was doing more reading, and I had been really submersed in a lot of like different aspects of what I do for work and academically what I had been doing for about 10 years. And I was like, man, like starting to feel just this massive, how would I explain it? Like just a general feeling of malaise, like just feeling really tired, feeling kind of burnt out. And I was like, this whole fishing thing's pretty relaxing.
What was your work?
I work in education.
Okay.
So I've worked as a teacher since 2007, but my work has kind of spanned between working in public schools to working as an instructional coach to working for a university, like worked on faculty. I still do currently in certain factions, but just just the overachiever, overworker. So I was like, man, I really need to find a way to kind of calm my mind and take heart.
That comes back to that comment you had mentioned earlier about the solitude. What do you think it is about the solitude?
The solitude?
Yeah.
I just think that there's such an importance in finding something, whether it's, it could be any hobby really, or a habit that, feeds into your wellness and into your soul. And for me, fly fishing has gone, I think, above and beyond. I would no longer call it a hobby. This is something that I like, live, breathe, feel, know, do. It's a land practice that, I feel like sometimes the more you learn how to fish, the less you know, because it continues to humble you in ways that you don't normally expect. Mm-hmm. And regardless of the solitude, or if you're with friends, I find that fishing for me is what would I say? It's a meditation on lots of things. Like it's a meditation on hope, like you're casting out every time, hoping that something's going to come, come and say hi, or, you'll be able to shake its hand before you give it back, or,
I like that.
To be able to pay attention to your surroundings, like I'm so grateful and feel so privileged to live in an area where, it's only a matter of less than an hour where I could find a place to fish.
Yeah.
And be able to find a fairly quiet place to fish, and be able to have kind of that connection to land. Because land practice to me is so important because it feeds into my wellness, right? Like it's what makes me feel better. It's what makes me feel well, beyond just the stress break. Cause
Yeah.
Dad will tell you, anyone who fishes will tell you, like, there are days when you go out there and you're stressed. Like you just, either the pressure gets to you, like, man, like I gotta catch this fish today, like I gotta get it, or most of it, I think, just self-imposed, quite frankly. But it's, or you've got, wind is not your friend, and lots of other, pieces of fishing that, kind of add to the technicalities, but also kind of that continued wonder, right? Like,
sometimes
I
just sitting
find
there watching a fish eat, and you're like, okay, I want to catch that thing, and it's like, why isn't it eating what I'm putting out there?
Well, yeah, exactly. And I mean, like, there's so much to pay attention to, like when we first arrive at a lake, like the first thing I'm usually doing is crouching down and looking at the first little universe, which is that, that entomology piece of like, what's eating, like, where's the bugs, like looking at scuds moving around, and big or small leeches, and, seeing what's flying around, or if there's any hatches, and just like, that came with time, because I certainly wouldn't have been paying attention at first. I would have just been like, hey, let's unload the boat, let's do this.
Yeah.
And, but that, I think, comes with a lot of time and practice, and, multiple attempts at, some kind of mastery of kind of trying to pay more attention. Cause I think that that's what fly fishing for me is. It's a constant quest to be asking, like, are you really paying attention? Yeah. Like every time that you get a fish in your net and you're paying, like, you're actually looking really closely. Like I took a photo recently of a fish that I was just like, man, like just these scales, looking at just the underbelly of this like golden universe of a fish, I know it sounds out there, but like, just really paying attention to that. And
is that recent photo on your Instagram account?
Pardon?
Is that recent photo on your Instagram account?
Yeah. Like I'm just so fascinated with the colorings, and all of these like delicate intricacies of trout in general, fish in general, but it doesn't have to be fish, it's whatever you're trying to pay attention to that helps with just overall feeling better and well. So I mean, like, it's hard to believe, but I mean, 20 years later, I'm finishing a doctorate degree, and the doctorate's surrounded in wellness practices and fly fishing.
Oh, that's cool. Very cool.
Yeah. Like, it's just kind of, it's unreal, but it's also real because it's what's become for me, and very much so for Dad too. Like, it's not just what we practice, but it's what we're doing.
What are some of the things that you think you learned from, excuse me, going through that doctorate's program and kind of exploring the relationship between wellness and fishing?
Oh, a lot of it was writing. I wrote, like, I inquired through writing. That was kind of my method of, like, I learned about, like, memoir writers, and, you do all the reading of fishing, like you swallow enough chapters of Roderick Haig Brown, and, you reread Norman MacLean, and you're listening to the poetry of, like, Thomas McGuane, and you're just thinking to yourself, like, man, like, a part of me was like, there's not enough actually, like, female voices in writing about fishing. And I certainly had no intention when I first started my studies to write about fishing, but because it had become such an innate practice, but also an important piece of what helps me to feel balanced and well and being on the land. I kind of just that's kind of where it went.
That's cool. Yeah. There's a big, I think, intellectual, delta with fishing, right? And there's something about that ongoing learning path that, as you described earlier, just never really completing that journey, but all along the way having these like micro journeys where you do accomplish certain things and you can see reward. It's very impactful in that way, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's what I think, that's probably one of the biggest learnings that, I've been, it's not just discovering, but it's just, it keeps coming back to that, is that, fly fishing in general has taught me such an appreciation for like the technicalities, the timing, the patience, just this like messy virtue of like coming to know that, even when you do like everything right, you still might not catch a fish.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And that really, I think that humbling piece of fishing for me, at least, it's like, yeah, don't get me wrong. Dad and I have had days where we're just like, hot damn, like I wish that we had caught more fish, or it would have been nice to just get a fish on the line. And, but then again, there is this bigger ecology of fishing that is going on in terms of what we do and what we appreciate doing, and why we keep coming back to it. Like all jokes aside, I think that's why Dad still hasn't, taken up golf, even though he often threatens to do so when it's a tougher day, or sell the boat, which, that's another, like, no, you're not selling the boat, that kind of stuff. Right. But, I don't know what we'd come up with the other day, Dad. We were in the boat, and, man, we were having a bit of a tough fish because we were trolling. It's midsummer, so picky eaters.
Right.
Temp was really good too on the lake. We were just so pleased, like for still water. Temperatures, can sometimes be too high. So we're trying to be really cognizant of that. But we had a really good temperature on the lake, and still, just a few nibbles, but nothing. And what did I say, Dad? It was like better to have nibbles and non-committals than no news at all.
Yep.
I think that's kind of what we came up with.
So when did you kind of reconvene and start fishing together again, or was it always like, we dabbled here and there? But it sounds like you fish a lot together now.
Yeah, I don't know, Dad. What do you think? Like, I think it's definitely been a dabble, and then much more in the last, like, I don't know, 10 years. We've made lots of concerted efforts to get out. Like, we're kind of like, okay, we're planning for next year. Like we're definitely, I think, in the last 10 years, the focus has been primarily on, where can we go to next, and what can we fish, or when we go back somewhere, what are we going to try again?
That's cool.
Yeah.
What do you like to look for, Graeme, when you're planning?
Planning?
Yeah.
What I look forward to? Well, obviously it's the journey. It's always the journey. It's always something new, even if you're going to the same place you've been to 20 times.
Mm-hmm. Do you do a lot of research on new places, and how do you guys kind of come up with the list?
There is that. Yeah, there is that. Obviously, if you fish enough of the still water that you're familiar with, they always say, you'll be more successful if you fish water that you know a little bit more about. Well, yeah, but sometimes again the lake can decide whether you're going to be successful or not. Depends on. But to prepare. I don't. It's more of the journey. I like the anticipation. I like the Catherine's saying about the meditation. That works for me. I look forward to that. I don't know what's the phrase I'm thinking of. I just like to be and listen to. I call it listen to the liquid silence of the waters, if that's a phrase. Whether it's a river or a lake, when we get there, I just listen to all that should be there, such as the birds, the eagles, the fish, of course, if they're jumping or whatever, or the insects if they're hatching, or damn dragonflies in your face, whatever it takes. But it's just there's a sound of silence, if that's my old Paul Simon Garfunkel thing, that I enjoy about any waters when I come to it, and that's my meditation. That part goes way back to when you just asked about the planning. That instills it right away. Besides, after that, there's expectation and the anticipation of having the tug grub. In other words, catching fish. But that makes me want to go out again, and of course enjoying Catherine's company too. But that works for me. And then when you come to that, I call that meditation point, when you're standing there and everything's in its place, and you say, and I'm supposed to be here too. That works for me in my inner core.
I like that.
If I'm there, there's a reason, and I'm part of this, and I don't want to abuse it. But not word isn't entitled, but I'm supposed to be here because I've made this effort and it's here. And I'm going to enjoy the ambiance, if the phrase is that, and hopefully be part of it. But the liquid silence of the waters, you can hear it now. I mean, the brooks, there's rivers, the lakes, they all have sounds.
Yep.
And that's part of the zen, I suppose, for me to get out and get it done. So that all starts when we first start planning something, or we're going to a different lake, or going to the same lake, or cabin life, or whatever we're doing. Yeah. So that's the prep.
I like it.
And then, of course, there's the physical part of it.
There is that accompaniment of sounds that goes along with it too, right?
Yeah.
All those other elements. Yeah. Yeah. No sound. Being its own sound.
Dad's definitely a planner, though. Like, he don't sell yourself too short, Dad. Like, he usually like a day or two before the trip. Like physically, he'll be getting the rod tubes out, getting the rods out. What flies do you think we should use? Resetting up the boxes.
Oh, we don't want to go there.
You go.
Now we're talking about technicals.
By then, we've probably gone to the fly shop like twice. Every trip we come back, we're like, yeah, we need more of those. And we're ripping down to the fly shop and
can never have enough flies, even though it only takes one.
Yep, I agree. And
pretty much.
It always growing. Oh, what about this one or that one? Yeah, it's the guesswork.
Well, yeah, or I mean, like we've had how many trips now? I think we've had six trips in a row now where I was literally working on the same egg sucking leech pattern, exact same fly. Hadn't even changed the leader. Couldn't believe it. And then I finally saw a fish take it, and it did not come back with it. And that was a sad day. But sometimes flies, they got to go.
Yep. They have their life cycle too, right?
Yeah. I was quite proud of the knots that must have tied because, man.
Stayed there for a while.
But yeah, exactly. But no, it's definitely, the prep's fun. I think we're the worst in terms of like food planners, though. We always pack like way too much food, but then, what we do pack, it's like just a hot mess of food that we're like,
that sounds like a good story. I want to hear some stories about that. But you know what? Let's take a break. Let's hear from our sponsors. When we get back, let's hear some of these good food stories. And then there's somebody else on the boat that we haven't introduced as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We'll be back. Angler's Coffee. We love fueling your next cast. We've been roasting coffee before coffee was cool. www.anglerscoffee.com. Dupafish. Coming soon. Pre-register now and get notified. www.dupafish, that's DUPEAfish.com. All right, welcome back, everybody. We've got Kat and Graeme Mulski on the line. These guys have been telling us about their story, father-daughter combination up in Canada, really kind of tearing it up and getting into some good fishing, enjoying themselves outside. And before we took the break, we started talking about some of your food preparation for your trips. You guys had some stories around that. Let's jump into that right away. Why don't you go ahead there, Katherine?
Yeah, no, what was the time that, so we had done a fish. We wanted to do a stillwater fish up in basically just outside of Merritt, kind of in that Cane Valley section. Beautiful area, lots of different lakes to kind of hit up. And we had a really good weather window, and it was kind of like our last ditch effort for the season to try and go fishing before the snow really hits the Coquihalla highway, which is like our main highway that kind of connects between ourselves at home here and the interior of BC. So, we ended up getting some really good weather, but pretty cold. Like we're looking at like the first week in November. Where most people are starting to buy vices and start tying flies. We were thinking like, okay, maybe we can get out there and do another trip. So Dad and I had packed up the boat, got everything ready, and started to head up the highway. And all clear, nice sunshine, but pretty cold. And you got some snow-capped mountains, no problem. So by the time we got into the valley, we kind of hit up what we thought was going to be our first stop for the day. And the whole lake's like completely like winter kill, like just flat out ice, and like not just a tiny bit of ice, just
cows were skating on it.
Yeah. So we were like, oh man, like we did not think this through. And so, luckily, you have a few other ones down the road that you can kind of check out, but clearly, I mean, they're all kind of at the same elevation, so you're not really sure what you're going to get into. So, we drove by a couple of the other ones, and, most of the entry or boat launch kind of, when I say launch loosely, because this is pretty much like, just grass and put your boat in kind of thing. And, yeah, we couldn't find an appropriate place to launch because we had such thick ice, like probably easily like 3 to 5 inches worth of ice. And we're just thinking like, man, this might be a really short fishing trip. So, we got to our last lake on the stretch before you kind of re-hit the connector to go into Merritt. And this lake had this pristine, like, the sun shining, just this beautiful bluebird, on the cusp of winter kind of day. And you just got this beautiful lake waiting for you. And yet it had how many feet of ice, Dad? Like,
well, it's a pothole lake, so it was ringed, if you want to call it.
Yeah, so it had the entryway was completely
about 75 to 100 feet of ice into this enticing middle part that was open water. And you said, I think Katherine said, I don't know, because I said, let's go somewhere else, but there was no more somewhere else's. So, yeah,
and I was like, no, we can do it. We can do it. We got this.
Yeah.
So, well, what are we going to break the ice up with? Well, we've got oars, right? We got oars. Yeah, let's do this. Let's do it with the oars. So, there we are, like unpacking all our stuff, getting woolies on now because we're like, 3-4 layers, thinking
right.
a little bit colder than we thought. Grab the toques. Let's do this. And, Dad's still kind of going, I don't know. I don't know about this. And I'm like, no, we got this. We can do this. Like, we've come so far. Right. You just like, it's the road trip attitude of, like do or die. So, or I should say fish or die. I'll give my friend Nikki that nod because she makes a great decal on that one. But, yeah, fish or die. So it was like, we started breaking up the ice. So I was sitting at the back of we have a little 10-foot wooden pram boat. And so there I am basically holding the boat steady with my oar. And then Dad was up at the front, just like manually just like trying to break the ice all around the boat. And I think we would move an inch at a time. I'd be like, no, we're almost there. We're so almost there. Like just as like the moral support. And I mean, I looked at videos the other day of this thinking to myself, it took us a good hour and a half.
And your arms are shattering, I'm sure, on every.
Oh, Dad had blisters. Dad had blisters for days on his hand because it was just the constant repetition of trying to break the ice around the boat, and then to the point where, you got so far in that the ice behind you was actually starting to collect up again, and we were thinking like, oh man, like what have we done? And an hour and a half later, we finally get out to this water.
Yeah, and the few people driving by were honking at us and thinking what kind of idiots are out there trying to get through to this ice.
Yeah, but it was a jaunt well worth it.
Was it productive? Yeah.
Oh yeah. We ended up catching these beautiful footballs of brookies, and nice like 2-3 pound, but they're all stocking up for winter, and it was just a beautiful day, like just this huge winter day. And just like, man, like maybe, I don't know, tops like, well, for our American friends, like probably, what do you think, Dad? Like 55, 53? Like I'm trying to think as Canadians, we're trying to think in Fahrenheit, like temperature wise. It's still pretty cold.
Oh, no, it was freezing. We're in 30s.
Yeah.
30s, yeah.
Yeah, we're still in 30s. Yeah. So yeah, it was, but it was a day and just catching fish. And you just think to yourself, like, that to me, just like, yeah, just going through that whole process of trying to, you're willing to break ice for an hour and a half to catch fish. That it's gone beyond just a hobby. You're like, yeah, no, we're here to fish. Like we're gonna make this happen, come hell or high water.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was well worth it. You know, I think, what did we do? Take our phones out after we had finally broke through, and like to prove to ourselves that we had done it.
Left a trail behind us like the damn Titanic.
Looked like the Titanic iceberg.
Not worrying how we're going to get back in. That was interesting.
Yeah, but, we gave ourselves a pretty good chill for the day, but it was
had to buy a new oar too.
Yeah, our oars were in pretty bad shape afterwards, but yeah, no, it's just funny. Like, I can't even imagine being, you know, like a bird on the branch watching that whole scenario, because honestly, the boat was going nowhere, and you've got this one person in the back being like, "No, keep going. This is awesome. You're doing great. We're almost there." You know, just
it was the African Queen in reverse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can do it. Get out. Get going.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
It was hilarious. But yeah, those kind of things where we're just always trying to get out and fish, for sure. Or, you know, we make the mistake of going to like a busier lake. I mean, you know, an hour and a half to break through ice to have a lake to yourself for the day seemed like good
It's
penance.
not bad, really.
But, you know, other times we've made, you know, steps in going to more popular lakes and been greeted with, you know, I don't know what it is about boat launches, but it's where everyone who doesn't want to launch a boat is.
Yep.
And, you know, so trying to, you know,
lawn chairs across the launch.
Yeah.
Kayaks stacked all over the place. Yeah.
It's too bad because, you know, you're just trying to get out there, right? And I get it, but, you know, you're just trying to get out there to fish, and then you're greeted with, like, I don't know, there must have been at least 40 boats on this lake that we were at, and just, you know, loud noise and like people not using electric motors like they should, and then just, you know, people listening to their own music on their boats and stuff. Like, it just, yeah, it's not what you expect for a timeout on the water.
Teaching experience. Yeah, it's a teaching experience too.
It was, but it was already like an ill-fated trip. We knew it was an ill-fated trip from like the arrival because of the ambiance, but then that was the year I learned no bananas in the boat.
Oh man, you had a banana in the boat?
Well, yeah, so I clearly hadn't been taught that part. I'm going to blame my mentor, like one of my mentors.
That was the first boyfriend. He was supposed to cover that. He blew
totally. And, you know, I brought
almost jumped out of the boat.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, because, see, we had been fishing, like 4 hours? Nothing, no nibbles. You know, we've got this ambiance of, like, just, you know, motley crew happening behind us. A nice day and everything, but still, you know, you're just kind of like, this is not what we were hoping for. And then, you know, what else do you do when the fishing's slow? I had to blame something. Yeah. You got to have a snack when the fishing's slow. So, you know, I pull out the banana, and Dad's just like, what the, you know, and expletive that starts with an F, you know, it's like, why would you bring that? Why we're not catching?
It's all your fault.
Yeah. We
and I'm like, what? You know, like, I'm halfway unpeeling, like trying to eat it, and before, you know,
before he rips it out of your hand and throws it in the water. Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah. So then, you know, I do my due diligence. You know, I'm like, fine, I'll get rid of it. So I throw it out. You forget how buoyant bananas are. So then we feel bad.
Well, we had to fish that back.
So we had to fish it back into the boat. And it was so bad. We caught, I think, one fish that day. We fished in a good solid 9 hours.
Because the only fish that was confused in the lake.
Oh, yeah.
Wanted to know what a banana looked like.
Came up for a
look. Oh, it's just terrible. And we had forgotten, like, we had, like, you know, you kind of have these like mysticisms about, you know, what do you pack that brings you luck, right? You know, there's a lot of people have lucky hats, or they have, you know, the lucky rod. And in our case, Dad hadn't packed like my OG rod, like the very first fly fishing rod that Dad had gifted to me was this like, I love it. It's I still love it. It's a 9 foot 5/8 pink elegance, like legit Amazon special. I'm not joking though, with the right reel and the right line, that rod caught so many fish. Like it's been like, it's just the relic, right? Yep. So we had forgotten to pack that too. So then Dad's like, first pinky, now the banana. He's like, that's it, the trip's off, you know, like we're going home. So it was pretty much. Yeah, it was also an educational experience when I have my
expensive sage rods and whatever, and she's catching 10 times more fish than I on her pink. And,
on like the $40 rod. Yeah.
The $40 rod. And I'm going, because I don't know how serious she was going to be at that time.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking, maybe there's something to this instead of dressing up like fly fishermen at a GQ magazine and having all this expensive equipment.
Right.
Maybe there's something to this.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
So you guys you have another member on the boat, though. Maybe more than one, but I know of one in particular that's got 4 legs. Let's hear about this cat. And then is there somebody else? Because I'm seeing a lot of photos too that look like they're taken from maybe a third body.
A third body.
Or are they maybe you're setting the camera up.
Your pro.
Is it your GoPro?
Maybe from your GoPro?
Yeah, that's probably what it is then, if there's no third.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No,
So, the photography. Yeah, the Nora, my English bulldog, she loves trout. She used to actually eat off of a big diet of fish before we had to change her diet, because English bulldogs are kind of, they're picky.
Yep.
And, she, it's a bit of a squeeze. I'm not going to lie. As I have to usually beg for her to come onto the boat, because it is a bit of a pain because we have such a 10-foot. It's already a squeeze for the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
But she's pretty good about kind of
one-man boat that morphed into a 2.5.
Yeah, that turned into a 2.5. Yeah. And, but no, she's a little observer. So, she just likes sitting in the middle and listening to trout. She'll listen to them rise, and she hears them, giving jumps, and gets excited when she sees them. So pumped when something's brought up from the net, and we have to hold her back because she'll try and lick them like crazy, right? But the treat is to lick the net after they've left and been sent back.
All right.
But yeah, no, she's a great little fishing. I call her little bulldog fish trout associate. She's a great dog. Today's her 8th birthday. So
wow.
Yeah,
happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Nora. But yeah, she's just a great little companion. And there's the 4th, I guess, is just the GoPro. Like, it's just most of the photographs I take, I'm pretty much limited to, if Dad doesn't, if I don't pass my phone over to my dad, then it's pretty much me with a GoPro, either on a tripod or I ended up purchasing a bunch of the accessories, which worked really well. So I just like to play around with photography and just kind of explore different angles and different ways of taking photographs, grip and grins are fun, and it's nice sometimes when you can see kind of like what people have caught, but I just really love the aesthetic of fly fishing. And I think a lot of that can be presented in different ways, over photographs. So I usually use like a clip sort of, accessory that holds the camera. I usually attach it to the boat, or I'll attach it to the net. It's been working out really well so far, and just still learning how to use half of it. Just more so for a part of that, enjoying fishing, but enjoying taking photographs of it too. I think if I could invest the time, which I probably will down the road, but not at this moment, but I'd get into SLR and start actually, taking, much more professional looking photographs. But for now,
I think you're doing a great job.
Just having fun.
You got some awesome photos, beautiful landscapes and whatnot.
Yeah, thank you.
Really cool.
Yeah, it's just fun. Most of the time, it's quite honestly like throw a tripod up and just like set it on a self timer for, just basically half a second shoots. So you end up with like a ton of photos, but it's kind of fun because then
there's
can
a couple good ones in there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think the rule of thumb for film and for photography is probably take more than you need.
Yep.
It's easier to clean up a cutting room floor than it is to try and find more film. So, yeah.
So we started to dive into some of the food that you guys take on the boat. You had mentioned that the banana scenario, of course, is one that's you'll never live down, but it also sounds like you guys have some trouble with packing food. Is this like a third or fourth element of the trip that's just not very well thought of, it sounds like. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm a planner for food. Like, I'm like, let's make a meal plan. And Dad's like, hell no. let's just like take this. We'll be in the grocery store. Well, this would be tasty. Like, I think we both kind of, what if we're feeling hungry for something at the time, that's what kind of like morphs our grocery shop for the cabin. And then we'll get to a cabin and be like, what did we buy? What have we done?
Or if we've planned a steak meal or something like that, we're so friggin' tired, we just open up a can of beans.
Yeah.
Which is what I did as a kid. That was the lunch, you know.
Yeah.
But you can be minimalist, or you can, depending on where you're going to be going, or if you're tenting, or you're staying in a cabin, or that all reflects on what the hell you're going to take up, or even try to take up. But for the most part, it's part of the journey. I get it. I get the food part, but snacks are more
Don't
important.
Forget the beer. Don't forget the beer, and snacks are important.
And exactly. Don't forget the drinks, or the libations, let's call it that.
Yep.
And the snacks. I mean, you can do that while you're fishing, because if you got to go and eat lunch somewhere, unless it's on the side of the lake at a bench or something like that, I'd rather be sitting in the boat fishing and having your sandwich or whatever you're doing. More time fishing, less time fooling around with menus.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like why our food's kind of lacked over the years. Because like typically, like in a day, like in terms of like actual time fished, like we'll start our day, have a breakfast, and then we're on the lake if we're actually staying somewhere, like say we're staying at the ranch or whatever, like if we're there, we're starting fishing well before 9. We'll fish right through till about 1:30, come in and force ourselves to make some kind of meal, force a mini nap, and then we're back out fishing by 3:30, 4 o'clock, and then not in until we're headlamping and trying to get back in around 9. Like we really push our hours. And not because we're like, oh, you know, like I don't feel a pressure. It's just that seems like a natural rhythm for us. Like we just love it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the twilight hour, I mean, that's kind of your twilight hour in the evening. That's a good time.
Every time, every different part of the day is a different pattern with the fish or catching the fish. Mm-hmm. So you might be a little slower, and depending on the weather and the barometer and that sort of thing. But at nighttime, now you're dry fishing. You know, you're not so-called forced to troll or indicate fish. You know, it's again quite interesting how that all changes. I mean, you can stay with the same thing all day long. I mean, okay, you troll and do what you want to do, catch some fish. But I think it's more fun to which Katherine has been a student of, and I have, about learning about the feeding patterns and the lake itself and how the weather changes and then adapt. You know, change what your offering is, or a different fly rod, or an intermediate, or you know, full sink, whatever's going on. But that's the fun part. It is.
Yeah.
Not trying to figure them out, because sometimes you do.
You're like, oh man.
Oh yeah. Or wind. We get lots of wind, so you got to be prepared. Yeah. Make sure your boat has double anchors. Yeah.
Yeah, and for the most part, like I think in the last couple of, probably especially this last year, we made way more of a focus on trying to get more into chronomid fishing, just because you know, like when you get it and you figure it out, it's, you know, it's a productive fish. And so, you know, I remember last year, like literally like fishing while doing, like no joke of a lie, have, you know, Dad set the anchors and we're sitting there in the boat, you know, during the windstorm, and I've got, you know, Skip Morris and Brian Chan's, you know, stillwater fishing on chronomid fish pattern book out, just reading it while trying to chronomid fish at the same time. Like just like
that was a high point.
Reading while doing. Yeah, I was like, Dad, did you know this and this? And Brian says to do this, and you know, so just like trying to like kind of learn by doing and going about it, right? But you know, I think for a long time we kind of avoided it because, you know, at first, you know, we'd plunk down. We did no research in terms of like, well, okay, we should really, you know, what did we do? Like I had bought I had bought Phil Rowley's awesome book that he'd done with Orvis on, the still water fishing. And it was like, okay, I'm going to read you after I finish these other 15 books because, I've got lots of stuff on the go kind of thing. And so, we finally get to Phil's and you see just these beautiful diagrams, perfect way of setting up your chironomid line, depending on the situation, water depth, etc. And I'm like, dude, we could have so used this last year. Like we literally wouldn't pay attention to that, throw an indicator out with a hope in the wind, quite frankly. And then, we sit there we wouldn't even give it 5 minutes and we'd be like, well, this is boring. Right?
We got anything yet.
Because you're just not paying attention, right? Like you haven't done the homework.
You haven't done it right.
Quite frankly,
knowledge
done
is
it right.
Knowledge is king, but the practice is the queen behind the man on the crown, or behind the power. I mean, it's nice to know all these things, but you've got to put it in practice.
Yeah.
And
we've made more concerted effort, I think, this year.
Yeah, doing it a little bit right for a little bit better success rate for that kind of fishing.
Mm-hmm.
And trolling's the same way, or if you're dry fly, same thing. And then it comes down to gear. I'm really a big believer for increasing the success rate, but that may be another subject for you. But well,
I mean, like we made the investments of this year, like actually, because when we're on the still water, we kind of, we'll have our different rod setups. And I mean, I think most people would understand that, you can never have enough fishing rods and you can never have enough lines and you can never have enough gear. And so, I was like, when I really committed to fly fishing, I was like, well, I don't want to just keep, rolling with one rod. So then, we started working with, okay, I'm going to invest in a 5-weight and it's a floating line only. And then the next purchase is going to be another 5-weight, but it's going to be 5-weight intermediate only. So like,
and is that what you were talking about, Graeme, in the gear investment?
Mm-hmm. Sorry?
Is
that what you were referring to in regard to the gear investment?
It was a learning curve too, because I went through and still probably a good seller out there for people to buy different tips and one line, and then maybe for river fishing, that sort of thing, to a certain degree. But for still water, have the line set up. Look at the lake, know what you're doing. If you got 5 rods, Katherine was saying, you got the sink, you got this, you got intermediate, you have what kind of fishing are you going to do in the next 3 or 4 hours? So you take those 3 rods, if that's what they're going to be, and they're broken down into 2 pieces. Even if it's a 4-piece, it's always down to 2, and so it can easily be banged up or put up and change over, and it's all set up, even down to the fly. Do all this on the bank or before you get into the boat, because you don't want to be doing this shit in the middle
otherwise
of
you're in the boat listening to a grumpy old man.
Excuse me, can you hang on to that while I put this in here? What kind of fly you got? Oh, geez, it's kind of windy to be tying a blood knot. Blah, blah. All this stuff. And then you go, geez, I've been fishing for 10 minutes, but we've been out here an hour because you're farting around with gear. So have the gear ready. It's that simple. Even down to your chronometer to set up, just have it all ready to go. And then you're fishing. And then there's more time with the line in the water. And it just makes a big difference. And then fish to the occasion. If you need a sinking line, don't fool around with a sink tip or putting weights on or anything else. Anyway, it's just a choice. And it's a lesson learned. It really is a lesson learned that it took some hard lessons. We just fished with the wrong stuff. We just didn't do this right. And some of you get from books, but a lot of it is dictated by the water that you fish.
And all the.
And unfortunately, it's going to cost you some money. Yes, it will cost you some money. And I go back to the Canadian tire rod works fine, but there's nothing better than a nice working kit that you have, whether it's a Sage, a Loomis, whatever brand name you can come up with. But if the combination of the line, the reel, and the rod works for you and your style of casting or whatever, you're going to like that rod a lot more. It's like playing guitar. You won't play guitar unless you like the guitar. You playing the guitar. You won't practice. I mean, it's that simple. And I got guitars. Trust me, that's another situation. And I've bought, just from the feel. And it's difficult, but most of the stores will let you take it out to the back alley and and cast the rod that you're paying $400 or $500 for or more, or even less. But they'll, or give you a week to try it out, something. But you got to find that. Once that you found that for that kind of fishing, whatever style of fishing, whether it's the deep sinks or chironomids or whatever, you're going to like your gear a lot better. And quite truthfully, I know you'll be more successful at it because all the mechanics will be better. Your casting will be better. Everything, for targeting fish or however you're doing for dry fly, everything, even the lines themselves, slick cast lines, etc. Whatever you're going to find, they'll cost you some money, but you know what? I won't say it's a lifetime, you'll obviously buy other lines and maybe another rod or two, unless you break them. But a lot of them now give you the second tips or lifetime warranties. But the gear is, I won't say paramount, but it really does increase the enjoyment of the experience.
Yeah,
it's obviously, I think it increases your success. Plus all the other little things we can talk about, knots and what you do and blah, blah, blah. But
it's part of that silence on the water you described earlier too, right? Your cast. When your cast feels really good, it's another part or element of that silence on the water thing you're talking about earlier.
Oh yeah, having that, knowing that everything's set up and ready to go is part of that. I think not just the efficiency train of that, but just like knowing that, okay, I've made this choice based on the lake that I'm at, or if we've known that, okay, today we're probably going to go sink and we're going to use a chironomid line, having a rod that's already pre-set up for chironomid rather than having to measure out and deal with a floating line, that's already been set up for dry fly, then that makes just more time, like Dad says, just more time on the water.
Right. And then that feel of the cast, like, oh man, this rod is set up right. It's just casting beautifully.
Oh, there's a huge difference. Like when my investment this year was in just a chironomid specific rod, and because I'm a bit shorter, I thought, I wouldn't mind trying to get a 10-foot for the pickup, like just a little bit of a faster pickup. And that's been, all the difference.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like much, but man, having that extra foot and having the right kind of line, I think at this point I'm dealing with like a Rio float indicator that's got a really nice taper that, just for the cast out alone is, it's just so helpful.
Yeah. I remember when
the right stuff kind of dialed.
When I changed to a nymphing specific, an indicator specific line, it was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It was like night and day situation there.
Yeah.
Well,
and
funny you should mention that word.
Asking yourself why, right? Why?
Why didn't I do this earlier?
Why did I do this earlier? Yeah. And I mean, nymphing's another, like, that's an aspect that we're actually going to be exploring with
that's one thing we haven't done.
Actually, we're going to go up and see him in a couple of days for a clinic. I'm really excited. Just, more aspects of learning, right?
Oh,
just
great.
Another technique, because that was.
That's another thing we mentioned earlier. Just, let's say, take some lessons, the casting lessons, etc. But explore, go spend a day with a guide, or go spend. Catherine's done this a lot in the rivers and that thing. You will learn so much on these waters from people who have been fishing it basically all their lives. And and down from gear to presentations to the river itself.
Support your locals.
Exactly.
Local guides, right? Local business, especially since COVID, right? It's like the industries have been hit so hard, so it's nice to be able to give back, but also have be able to go and have those opportunities and the privilege to be able to learn from other people, right? Like I think fly fishing is one of those things that you really do have to put your ego aside if you really want to commit yourself to this kind of work. I really do. I think that this is something where you can always learn. You're always going to have to learn, and you're always going to be learning.
For sure.
Because I remember even when I first started, I was like, I'm going to get into fly fishing, right? So, back to that pink elegance, you're sitting there and it's a terrible rod in the sense that it's not going to cast what you want it to cast. And yet, I hand it over to Dad, and Dad's just like, oh my gosh, I don't know if you've ever seen that meme online with Will Ferrell with his baton and the rhythmic, the rhythmic balletic ribbon.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like watching that happen, right? He just cast out, at 10 and 2, no problem, fore and aft. And the thing rolls out like just this beautiful, like the red carpet for celebrities. And yet here I am just fighting it back and forth, just seesawing, not even knowing what I'm doing. And I do distinctly remember several fights in the boat as a result of like, like, you're just not showing me right, or you're not telling me how to do this. And Dad's like, take a lesson. So,
Yeah.
Big shout out to Tim Arsenault, actually, out of Michael and Young, who I paid for the time, and I said, Tim, I need you to help me learn how to cast this thing. And man, like, it just goes a long way to store the ego, nothing, learn from the basics, and do this right, learn the mechanics, and it pays tenfold.
And there's a difference too, because you can be a really good caster, but you don't know how to teach casting.
Oh yeah.
And someone that knows how to teach casting is
like driving a car. Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally different. They can give you all the right little tips. Oh, you want to slow down. This is why that's happening. And they can really teach you and explain it. And it makes much more sense. So let's do this.
No, exactly. It was like just completely breaking it down from, basically step by step, and re-practicing those skills too is a big thing. Like in the off season now, like basically when Stillwater ends, for us, about like mid-November-ish, or whenever we think we have to start breaking up ice with oars, we're, I take my rod actually to, I'll take it to school. Because we usually have a really nice field in the back, and I'll just tie a little lint or something on it, and or I cut the hook off of a dry fly.
Yep.
Just to keep up with the mechanics of that, right? Not that I'm losing it too much, because I've been picking up a lot more river fishing on the off season of Stillwater, but into the winter months, because you kind of want that never Stillwater time, right? You just want to keep fishing all the time. But
I'm the same way.
Just practicing is really helpful. So that was the biggest thing, is just put the ego aside. Know that you can always learn something. Doesn't matter how old you are.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I go to the park. I typically, when I park cast, I cast a bigger rod. I really kind of aim towards working on my saltwater fishing. The other thing I do is I keep a 3-pound sledgehammer by my couch, and if I'm sitting down watching TV or taking a break, I'll sit there and use the 3-pound sledge as a weight in my hand to kind of strengthen my forearms for that heavy casting on those big rods.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then just like I'm always I think we're just always trying to find opportunities to keep that, like Dad says, calling it the tug drug, but just always wanting to never not be fishing, right? So in my case, like, I was really thankful Dad had introduced me to Kat LaFlamme out of Michael and Young shop here locally in Vancouver, because her and Jill Steele out of High Water Tackle had started a BC women's fly fishing group, and I was like, sick, all right, let's do this. Like,
that's cool.
Let's go fish. And there's been so many opportunities presented as a privilege of this, just joining a girl gang kind of thing, and learning how to do different types of fishing, river fishing, sturgeon fishing, and targeting different types of trout, going bull trout fishing, and char, go up Skagit. Yeah. It just depends on where you want to fish, but just being able to have that camaraderie of learning in a way that it's not that I wouldn't go with Dad, because we've got our own plans for a few fishing trips in the same kind of capacity, but just being introduced to that and having the opportunity to go is just helps extend your season, if you want to call it, or just it helps extend just I used to snowboard a lot, so it's kind of like that never summer feel, right? Yeah. Like you just want to keep fishing.
Great. So let's take a break. We're gonna hear from our sponsors again, but when we get back, I want to hear about your local fishing areas and talk about how you guys set your boat up, up some of your gear, and how you fish your local waters. Sound good?
Awesome.
Sure. Right. Sure.
We'll be right back.
Anglers Coffee. We love fueling your next cast. We've been roasting coffee before coffee was cool. www.anglerscoffee.com. Dupa Fish. Coming soon. Pre-register now and get notified. www.dupafish, that's DUPEAfish.com.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. We've got Katherine and Graeme Mulski on the line, and we've been talking about some Stillwater up in Canada. They also fish some rivers, have a nice pup on the boat, and seem to really have a great time together. When we took the break, we talked about coming back and covering some of the setup you have on the boat and gear that you're using, et cetera, and just really have some general discussion around the local waters that you're fishing as well. Graeme, why don't you go ahead and dive into that?
Yeah, I'm going to say back it up a little bit. It starts with the boat. I mean, most of our still waters need a boat. When I say need, it's limited access from the shore, so the boat's one of the first parts of the equipment you might say you need. I skipped the belly boats because the belly boats had limited opportunities. I'm not saying that they're not good or just good for hike-ins and that sort of thing, but I wasn't into that type of remote fishing or whatever. Most of the lakes were smaller, so I went into called a pontoon boat and did well with that. And I was one of the first up here to actually put a motor to it because I was tired of flipping my flippers and my oars and no place to put the gear, or limited. And then I graduated, if you want to call it, to a Zodiac style blow up because it didn't require transporting it basically on a trailer. So I'd say the choices, and now right now we're using a pram, and I'll explain what the pram is. It's pretty simple. But and I always wanted a still water. It's called a still water pram. It's completely made out of wood, and it's very beautiful, well-made product that was made by folks just outside of Seattle. And they've been building since the 30s. They're both passed now. The
Smith Brothers
sons and. Yeah, so the boat would be a choice when you're going to Stillwater. So choose your boat or choose your craft, or unless you can afford both or three of them or whatever, depending on, obviously you just need a pair of waders and boots and stuff, that sort of thing, and maybe a chest pack. For river fishing, it's a little different, but I'm talking about Stillwater. It's a little bit more, let's say, involved than just putting your boots on. Mm-hmm. Now back to going to the rods I mentioned earlier. Not a big believer in a single rod that'll, change the tips and whatever. Because every dry fishing, trolling, deep sink fishing, intermediate, subsurface, all that kind of fly fishing requires a different discipline and, quite truthfully, a different rod. Just the feel of the cast on all those different rods. And the feel of the drag, or the feel of the tips, the action as we call it. They all have different applications, and you're going to find it quite nicely. It'll be appealing to you because you'll enjoy casting, you'll enjoy retrieve, you'll enjoy the targeting. Everything a little bit more concise than just trying to fish with one rod. 4-piece, sure, but not necessary, because 4-piece is just the equivalent of breaking it down and packing it. But we always break them down to 2 pieces, put together, the 4, of course, into a rod case for storage. But coming to the lake, you take them out. You might want to keep the reel case on just to protect it, but have all the rods set up. We mentioned it earlier. Have them set up to what you're going to be fishing for. So if it requires a 7.5 or 9-foot leader plus tippets, then you have that set up on, or if you're fly, that's for your dry, let's say, for example. And even down to the first dry fly you're going to put on. Don't put it on in the boat or make a decision. Do it there, then and now, and then you're ready to go. And the same thing with maybe a different leader, different butt section for the sinking line. Again, to the intermediate, the ghost lines, I call them. Quite fun to use, and I love using the intermediate. And then to the weights. 5 and 4s seem to be the norm. I love the little Sage 4 weight that I have, but I also like the other rods that what do we got? That's half a dozen of them, to be honest with you. But brand name is really more your choice, I think, personally, and the way the rod feels. And of course, you want to make sure that it's well made. So there's lots of that out there, and you don't have to spend a fortune. But spend a rod that's going to do you well for that kind of fishing. And again, going back to the flies, again, sort it out. Have a box or some kind of organizational tool that you can at least pull to your day pack. We call it a day fish. It's just you take from the motherboard or the mothership all the flies that you're going to use for that afternoon or that day, dry, wet, whatever, and you put it into a small box or a box that'll carry these flies. And then you've sort of limited or you've minimalized what you need to take to the boat. In the early days, I used to bring 5 different cases of bloody flies down to the boat. Takes up room, and it's nonsense, to be honest with you. You can sit it in your car, or you're on your way, or the day before, or the night up. You know where you're going. Just put it into a day pack, and that can change. You go to the mothership. If you're living or staying in a cabin or Best Western or whatever, you bring it up to the room, and for the next day, it'll save you a lot of time and effort. And so, yeah, and use good product. Obviously, there's good, Scientific Anglers, Rio, all this is good stuff. I'm a big believer in using the right leaders, non-tapered for indicator or an indicator line. They're all specific now, or make your own if you want, tapered for, some of the dry fishing. Yeah, and fish to the species. If you've got 7 or 8 or 9 pound fish in there, you shouldn't be using a 6 pound tippet. You're going to have some disappointments because there will be some big fish, and wherever you are, that will scream the reel, and away you go. And that's another thing. Make sure you got a good reel. When I say a good one, something that has a decent, I would say a retrieval to a certain degree, but certainly, what do you say? What's the word? It has to have the capacity for the fish that you're fishing. In other words, to have some tension, that sort of thing. And use the rod, and that's the actual style of it. The rod will really come in handy landing the fish and say tiring the fish out so you don't kill it. You don't have to have a long time pulling a fish in, a big fish on a 3 or 4 weight rod. That being said, the Euro nymphing and the Czech nymphing is a little different, but that's a 10.5 foot rod and smaller usually. But for gear, yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't know what else to say about setting yourself up other than I'm a big believer in multiple rods. It just works for me. It works for us. And it's going to cost you a little bit more, but it's so easy to switch over and be confident that you have the right gear or the right tool at that time to at least have a little bit more success or a chance of success of, besting these little fishy things that seem to find their own way of beating you anyway. And up here we have to fish with barbless hooks. So a lot of places don't have, and it's single hooks, by the way, and no double hooks. We can fish with, this is how weird it is. We can fish with 2 rods. If you're by yourself in a boat, we can fish with 2 rods, but we can't fish with 1 rod with 2 hooks.
Single hook barbless.
And yeah, always barbless. Now that gives about, quite truthfully, 80% of an opportunity of a fish to get off. It's called fishing. It ain't called catching up here. So it really does swing to the advantage of the fish. It's a good rule. I like it because we're not predators anymore. The long story I'm not going to tell you about how I got involved with letting fish go. But I got taught by a fellow on a river. Mm-hmm. He was a minimalist, but he explained to me that I only need 1 damn fly. And anyway, long story short. And I would catch more fish by letting them go. And I thought he was full of crap, but that seemed to work out from that day on. So we let them go. And I think that's a little bit of a secret, too. I'm a big believer if you've been successful and you've bested this little creature, let it go do its thing for sport for another fisherman, that sort of thing, or grow. That's amazing. In fact, you'll get after a while by letting them go. If anybody's a predator out there, you're going to have as much thrill letting the darn things go as you did catching and having sport. And that's really for me, it's what it's all about. I try to tell other folks about that, but I understand you want to keep some fish to eat. They're not certainly endangered, but as far as gear goes, that's pretty much it. Christian,
I think that's good advice. You hit a lot of great spots there. What about you, Kat?
I usually have the box of the mops and like boobies and blobs, like basically like the Motley Crew box, which is like if nothing else is working. And then I usually keep a mother box. So like one of my big like MFC boxes, I usually have like, you know, pretty much everything and anything in there. And that's usually something that's kept in, you know, either in the trailer or in the car, unless I'm, you know, on the day of, and then I might review and go back into it. But I usually have a few staples that I keep. Like I usually have a box of just leeches, like all different kinds of leeches, different colors, lengths, sizes, hook sizes, you know, whether it's rabbit tail or other. And then I usually have like an entire box of buggers, like a lot of different types of woolly buggers. And then, you know, on the boat, usually Dad has kind of like his kill pile, and then I have my pile. I will say his pile is usually a lot more than mine, but that's because I think Dad changes over a lot more than I do. Like I'm kind of a ride or die with my fly. I'm like my rule in a still water lake on any given day is like, if they're not going to eat a leech, they're not hungry. You know, like just kind of like based on, you know, like mostly it's based on seasonal knowledge. Like it's sort of like, well, this time around, you know, they should be eating this, this, and this. And like, if they don't want to take any of that, then, you know, you kind of go to the plan B box, right? But yeah, like definitely, you know, your staples of like a black leech, pumpkin head, like, you know, caddis, emerger, like things that, you know, seasonally are going to work typically on a lake are kept in like pretty close quarters. And then I've usually got some mini, like kind of those micro boxes with my like chronomids only, you know, a box of bombers. And then all my other multiple sizes are kept in like just those kind of like those little mini dragonfly kind of, containers. So yeah, I usually go by that. And my rule of thumb anytime I'm buying flies is usually I'll always buy 2 or 3. And that's usually 2 for me and 1 for Dad. So if I catch, then he gets one. Just because it seems only fair, you know, or, you know, I kind of wish we had, like I know in the States, like there's a lot more of that flyberry project going on. And I don't see a lot of flyberries in like up here in the interior in particular. I don't see any hanging out at the lakes. So I'm just like, you know, if I meet someone and they ask, you know, like, oh, what's been working? And I've got an extra, like, I'll give it to you. Sure. You can have one of my flies. Like, you know, cause I never not fish with like just one kind of that fly, you know, like you want McConnells, you want mosquitoes. Like I'm going to have like probably 6 or 7 of size 14s all in one box. So, you know, I don't have too much mysticism around like that's the magic fly. It just so happens, you know,
until
like
it's the last
particular, until it's the last one, or it really was, you know, kind of a magical fly. And then, you know, I was kind of glad that it finally ran its course. So, but yeah, like it just really depends. What you see on the water usually informs what I'm going to pack the box with too, especially if we're going to a lake that we don't know. Like if we haven't gone fishing there before, you know, your local fishing stores are great in terms of like knowledge. You know, you tell them like, hey, I'm planning on going here. You know, anyone who's fished here lately, you know, they'll tell you. And that's usually what kind of guides what I'll then pack or plan for, and then, you know, kind of decide going forward what, you know, I might want to choose and use. But yeah, same thing. You know, I don't use my intermediate as much. I only do on lakes that I know their depths in particular. Like if there's a big bloom on a lake, I'm not usually going to be fighting with an intermediate line. I'm going to go full sink right away, for better clarity for the fish, to see it. But you know, just depending on what the ecology of the lake's doing and what the depth is, really kind of determines usually what lines I'm going to use for the day. And sometimes, and quite often temperature and time of day. You know, like especially like there's nothing better than, you know, like the evening dry fly action that you can get off of the majority of stillwater lakes in BC right now. You know, like now's the time, like just as we've had this like cooling pattern right now, it's just awesome. You know, and then chronomid fishing is, you know, obviously from having finally done a ton of reading, and, you know, you watch all the vlogs and you just take in all this knowledge. And, you know, I mean, Brian Chan, just like so much like gratitude towards all the research that he's done, but he'll be the first and the last to tell you that, you know, chronomids make up, you know, more than 80% of a trout's diet. So why wouldn't you use chronomids?
Right.
even if you're just a mathematician, those numbers are good, right? So, just working with, what you can learn and know from what a lake's telling you, right? So, just really paying attention to the bugs and knowing the seasons of hatches is something I'm still learning. So, sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm totally wrong. But yeah, I find that in general, like I fish with, at any given time, about 4 or 5 rods on rotation. I really got into the Redington line of the Vice rod.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 of them because I just loved it. I love that rod, and I thought, okay, I'll make an investment. So one's a float, like a solid float line for dries, and then another one acts as a sink line at all times. And then, I obviously have a chronomid set up this year. I was so pleased with Moonshine's Moonshine's
I'm just going to give a shout out to Moonshine. Excellent rods. I think they're out of Colorado.
Yeah, Dad had gotten one last year, and he pulled it out this year. And a bit of a sucker for the aesthetic. I was like, man, that's some rose gold on that. That looks so good. And then you're thinking to yourself, like, okay, well, how's the technicalities of this rod? Like, is it worth investing
wonderful.
in? And it was. So, yeah, that's the one that I ended up getting in a 10-foot for the chronomid fishing. And, it's fast action. So, sometimes you're like, oh man, am I going to lose this fish because it's moving around tons, but it's good. Like, it just makes the sport so fun, right? When you have the right rods for what you're doing. And then, I just have, right now I'm working, my intermediate sits on a 4-weight, Redington Pass. And that's awesome. Like, especially when you catch, even on a 3-weight, when you're catching, these 1.5, 2-pound trout, they just feel like monsters, right?
Yeah.
So that's half the fun, like sometimes switching up, just the weights, a lot of the times your staple is just, I'll get my 5-weight out and do this. Right. But, especially if you're going creek fishing or you're going and doing a bit of wet weighting, especially when we've had some of this hotter temperatures, but the actual water temps have been okay. And safe to fish. It's been so good to take, the 3-4 weights in there. And when you do find a monster, you're like, well, I'm glad that it's a 4-weight, but I put 3X on, because it just makes like such a difference with retaining the fish. Right. And that's usually, for the most part, like the 4-weight and the 5-weights, any of the leaders I'm using, any tippet, it's usually 3X. I don't normally use anything higher unless I know, I know a lot of people argue, well, finesse and understanding that, you don't need that much for a fish, but I've just had, in the last 10 years, I've had too many opportunities where no one likes to lose a fish.
Yep.
Like, especially when you can't see it before you lose it. Like, I think there's a metric of losing fish. And I think the worst is when you have it, and it's so exciting, and everything's all, the stars are lining up, Netman's ready to go. We call each other Netman because depending on who's got the fish on, and we're like, seriously, like we want to get like the Top Gun style hat that says Netman, and everything's ready and rolling, and then you lose that fish and you don't see it. So now your imagination is like, it was a hog, when it could have been, who knows. You'll never know, right? That's the killer. Whereas I think there's a lesser hurt metric when you can at least see it and you lose it, versus actually retaining, seeing the fish, and then being able to give it back, right? Because I think there's nothing more rewarding than letting fish go. So I'd agree. It's just cool because it's you've that trout or that fish, depending on what species you're targeting, they're at the helm of your choice. And, that's a privilege to have in land practice. So, getting to the gear, I don't like losing fish. I don't think anyone does. I've never met someone that's like, man, I love losing fish. So, that's usually my weapon of choice is I've really appreciated the Scientific Anglers line for a lot of years now, in particular, some of the tippet that they've come out with this year. You've got to save your pennies and do 11/8 stand fundraiser because it's getting pretty expensive, but it's awesome. Like the quality and the technicalities that they put into, just producing thinner and yet stronger line every time is just phenomenal. And I really appreciate their indicator. Yeah. Right. And, that's just for us in the Stillwater sections. I haven't even done a lot of salt yet, but I don't have the best sea legs. I do have a good.
You got
story
leg
about that one
legs.
last year.
You got leg
Yeah.
legs. Well,
So
hey guys.
yeah, exactly.
You know, this has been a really enjoyable process for me. It's been great getting to know you two. I'm so glad we had you on the call this week, and appreciate all your great insight. So, how can people get a hold of you, Kat? What's your Instagram handle?
Oh, it's Kath on the Fly, KATHONSLY. Kath on the Fly. Yeah. Shoot us, send us a message. We'd love to hear from anyone. Fishing stories are good, especially if they're truthful.
Got it.
Or
well, Graeme, Kath, thanks again for being on the show, and everyone, we'll see you next week.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks. Thank you.